They dress it up in liberal clothing, to continue the metaphor. It's all about women's rights. Well, we've been here before. Mrs. Blair, no less, and Mrs. Bush told us that one of the reasons they were going to bomb Afghan women was so that they could liberate them from the form of clothing that they had chosen to wear. And so this struggle must be waged on both these levels. It must be waged amongst the poor in our country, who have been deceived into believing that their problems are somehow the result of the Muslim on the corner, the Muslim across the road. But it must also be addressed to those liberal and intellectual circles, the Euston Manifesto and David Aronovich and all the others, who like to parade themselves as liberals, but who are echoing the words and who would achieve the same result if they were successful as the gutter snipes like Kelvin Mackenzie and the rest. And of course, the more they talk about liberalism, the faster we really should count our spoons. Because when you examine it, they're not very liberal at all. Oliver Cam, for example, in the Times, is conducting a campaign to have me off the radio because he doesn't like what I say. Dawood Abdallah was told by that paragon of virtue, Hazel Blears, that he must resign from the vice presidency of the Muslim Council of Britain because she didn't like what he had to say. Well, as my friend Shamil put it very passionately earlier, Muslims have the same right to speak in this country as anybody else, and no one is going to take that right away from them. Now, of course, there are some who've decided that they will trade their principles and their rights for a place at the table. They think they've got a seat at the table. As Brother Malcolm X said, just because you're at the table doesn't mean you're dining. You might be a waiter. They might not put anything on your plate. Being at the table isn't the point. And this is something perhaps I can more easily address than some of the other speakers on the platform. You see, when the government tried to ramrod through Parliament on Wednesday its bogus, fake inquiry into the Iraq War, with a parade of establishment flunkies, at least two of whom have regularly supported the war in Iraq into which they're now inquiring, the only speaker, check Hansard, the only speaker who supported the government's motion in Parliament, other than the ministers themselves, was a Muslim Member of Parliament, Mohammed Sarwar, whom I'm sorry to say I played a very significant part in helping to get into Parliament in the first place. And because I know him so well for almost 30 years, I knew that not a word of the speech he was delivering was written by him. It was given to him, probably by the government themselves. These people, I saw another one on Newsnight the other night. I forget his name now, some fellow who used to be in an extremist Muslim organization and has seen the light on the road to I don't know where. And he was in Pakistan with a very nice suit, although we were reminded that under it was a bulletproof vest. If I could get one of those slimline bulletproof vests, I might invest in one myself. He was one of the leaders of the Quillim Foundation. What's the Quillim Foundation? I hear many of you ask. Well, you really ought to know because you're paying for it. Last year, in 1 year, the Quillim Foundation received £1 million of British taxpayers' money. It's nice work if you can get it. It's a gravy train, as Brother Dawood Abdallah said. £1 million for what? For going around in the service of the British state calling other Muslims extremists. Well, there's nothing extreme about opposing the mass murder of Muslims in Iraq or Palestine or Lebanon or Afghanistan or Pakistan, and nobody, however much they're paid, is going to stop us from doing it. So I very much welcome the foundation of Kifah. Enough. Enough is enough. We intend to take this show on the road. We intend to recruit the broadest possible support for this campaign. We don't intend to let it run out of steam. We're going to support it financially. We're going to support it with our shoe leather. We're going to support it with the same kind of organizational skills that the Stop the War Coalition and its allies have shown since the very beginning of this miserable saga some years now ago. We have to be out of here by 8:30, and so I'll conclude with this. It's the point on which I started. You see, if you're going to keep people's support for an imperialist, colonialist war, or as it's turned out, series of wars, you have to reduce your adversary in the eyes of right-thinking people. You have to, I say this to low-key, it is actually axiomatic. If you're going to keep people's support for the mass killing of others, you must force, by some means or other, the population to consider that those whom you are killing are less than you. You have to make their blood cheaper than the blood of others. Otherwise, people would rise up. 1,400,000 Iraqis are refugees. 1 million Iraqis are dead, on top of the 1 million Iraqis who are dead as a result of the sanctions before the war. We have no idea how many Afghans are dead because no one bothers to count them. The Lebanese lost thousands in 2006. The Palestinians 1,416 just a few short weeks ago. Think of that mountain of dead people. Millions of dead people. Think of that ocean of human blood that has been shed by us and our allies in just a few years. Imagine that you had not dehumanized the people whose blood it was. Imagine if they thought that blood belonged to people just like the man or woman next door. Imagine if people saw the mountain of dead children in Gaza as being like a mountain of dead children in the centre of London. Imagine how they would reject it. Imagine how they would rise up against it. So this is no accident. Of course, the knuckle-dragging racists of the BNP, in their heart they hate anybody who's different. But it's no accident that the posh papers and the dirty papers ruled by billionaires who would never read the stuff they caused to be published and circulated if they weren't the owners of it. It's no accident that these people want to turn right-thinking people against Muslims and against Islam, because that's the fuel which fuels their war and occupation around the world. And so therefore, you see, this is potentially a win-win for us. If we can combat and root out racism and Islamophobia in Britain, it'll make Britain a better place. And if we root it out, it'll be much, much harder for our governments to take us to wars abroad in the future. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.